Shmai, croeso nôl i chi. Welcome back. That music reminds me of Aerosmith for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. Okay, let's go to our next speaker then, please. I'm Imlan in Siadarwr Gwaith Ieuenctid. His name is Mr. Keith Towler. And Keith, hopefully you're with us live. Are you there, Keith?
I am, yes. Good to be here.
Thankfully, thank goodness for that. Thank you so much for joining us. Diolch yn fawr iawn. You've been with us throughout the morning. What have you thought so far, Keith?
Very slick, very smooth, very impressed with this, with the way it's going. Good to see engagement on chat. And I just took a look on my Twitter feed. See, there's quite a lot of activity there too. So yeah, it's good.
Good. And what about the messages? Any important messages coming out so far?
Interesting to see those numbers around furlough. Interesting to see that about 50% of the audience have read the report that I'm about to talk about. I'm going to ask colleagues if they can post links to the report into the chat so that the remaining 50% of you at least get the chance to take a look at it.
Okay, well, with that in mind, then I will hand over to you, Keith, and we'll come back to you later on. I will be keeping an eye on the chat. Okay, so Keith Towler, diolch yn fawr iawn. Keith.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Bwrdd pawb. Great. I was going to say great to see you all, but all I can see is myself. I don't need the slides at this point. The slides are for a bit later on. If you could take the slides down, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, I'm the only live speaker this morning, so no pressure. Anybody who has worked on the SPGs and with me over the last few years will know that I haven't got the greatest Wi-Fi signal in the world. So hopefully you can hear me, you can see me. The sun is shining. I have a theory that when the rain pours down, my signal deteriorates. But I'm broadcasting to you live from my front room in Llandilo. Okay, the last couple of years have been really challenging for everyone. And here we are again, celebrating and developing our youth work practice by sharing ideas, showcasing the sector's creativity, and talking through the challenges and the opportunities. I hope that when we do this conference again, maybe next year, we'll have maybe a hybrid event or an opportunity to get together face to face. But I'm sure we'll all have a fabulous day today, and the creativity, the discussions, and the engagement will be just as good as ever. I want to use my time this morning to talk briefly about the work of the Interim Youth Work Board, of course, and the report we've now published. I'm also going to conclude my time in the spotlight to pay tribute to all of those who've gained the quality mark for youth work in Wales. When we began our work as a board 3 years ago, none of us would have predicted how a global pandemic would change everything from how we work, socialize and keep in touch with our own families, friends, work colleagues, and of course the young people that Youth Work Services are here to support. On behalf of the board, I want to pay tribute to every youth work volunteer, youth worker, youth support worker, and manager for the work and commitment you've shown to young people in Wales over the last 2 or 3 years. The pandemic has really focused our minds on the things that are important, helped us to renew and establish new links across our own sector and with colleagues in other sectors. It's also been a period that has shown how fragile the sector is, but how vulnerability has in adversity demonstrated a real core strength and determination to serve young people. The sector's had to face the fact that not all its constituent parts are in a healthy position, or indeed the same position, and that the only way that youth work services can thrive is if support for each other is prioritised. It might sound dramatic, but the sector's survival really does depend upon its ability to collaborate. Every youth work practitioner knows the value of a youth work approach, how important it is for young people. But the pandemic has strangely helped to profile the importance of youth work to teachers, to doctors, to colleagues working across the public sector. The Minister this morning spoke about recognition and the importance of youth work, as did those fabulous youth workers and young people. Thanks to all of you for doing that. I wish I'd had the wisdom to pre-record as well. Young people have fed back to us as a board so many times that the only person they've had regular contact with during the pandemic was with their youth worker. Someone who provided a lifeline, kept them safe, provided advice and things to do. But more than anything, those young people knew they were not alone and that they mattered. So as the board has worked with the sector via the strategic participation groups, or the lovely named SPGs, and with young people across Wales through the Let's Talk sessions and with the fabulous Young People's Committee, the urgency and importance of setting out a series of recommendations so that we can deliver a sustainable model for a rights-based universal youth work offer to every young person in Wales has become really clear. My speech, I wrote a sentence which goes, I'm hoping that all of you will have now read our final report. I know, because of the wonder of the poll, that 50% of you have read the report. That's great. And I hope that the remainder of you take the trouble to get hold of the report and read it. What it does is it sets out a series of recommendations around securing, sustaining and keeping our youth work service and helping it thrive. Like all reports, I suspect there'll be things in it that you like, things that you might take issue with, and that of course is fine. This is about debate, but this is more than anything, it's about actions that follow this report. From here on in, it's all about what is going to be shaped next, how the Minister and Welsh Government will respond, as he said, to the challenges that the report outlines. I'm not going to run through all the recommendations, not least because we haven't got enough time this morning, but you will see as you read through it that we're talking about a substantive programme of work, from establishing a young people-led governance model for youth work, strengthening the legislation for youth work, creating a national body, and reviewing the way Welsh Government uses its money to support youth work services, through to establishing an entitlement scheme for every 11 to 25-year-old in Wales. I really welcome the way that Jeremy Miles, our Minister, has responded to the work. He's committed to providing a full response to our recommendations, as you've heard, by the end of the year, and that is really welcome. And I know in terms of the speed of that, giving full consideration to what we've said and making a pledge to respond by the end of this year is really fantastic. As he mentioned, he's asked us as the interim board to continue our work into next year ahead of the formation of a new implementation board. That's a really significant announcement for at least two reasons, I think. Firstly, it recognises the momentum that's been generated with young people and with you, the youth work sector, working in collaboration with us at the Interim Youth Work Board. It's important that the momentum that we've developed is maintained. It's not just about the interim board, however, it's about all of you continuing to do what you do, advocating for youth work every day. It's about recognising that young people are key in all of this, that they want and expect to be involved, driven as they are by a desire to protect and develop youth work services in their community. And secondly, establishing an implementation board moves the work forward. Suddenly it moves from a policy brief that we've held as an interim board, where we've been asked to develop recommendations, to a delivery body, a new brief for the board, a brief that will bring the recommendations that the Minister wants to progress alive. It gives me real room for quite a lot of optimism that the Minister and Welsh Government are serious about implementing a sustainable future for youth work services in Wales. This is reflected in the increased investment into youth work services that the Minister referred to this morning. I've seen in the chat that a number of you have welcomed that investment, and it's important to recognise and welcome that growth. And we also know that Mark Drakeford, our First Minister, also values and supports youth work services. So the future for youth work in Wales looks bright. But I'd like to use this opportunity to outline some thoughts on how we must all now embrace the opportunity ahead. A business as usual approach to all of this is not going to lead to the kind of change we're beginning to see emerge. At the risk of being deliberately provocative, I want to be clear that everything we're talking about here has to be focused on what young people talk about when they describe the importance of youth work in their lives. This is not about protecting youth service for its own sake. This is about developing our universal youth work offer in such a way as to meet the express needs of young people in Wales. We've got the principles and purposes of youth work. We know what youth work is and how to deliver it. We've some of the best youth work practice anywhere in the world. So let's use that confidence to shape something that can grow to meet the needs of future generations of young people in Wales. We need to build a learning culture in youth work, ensuring a growth mindset that's able to reflect on successful approaches, learn from those that don't go so well, and shape a program of innovation and change. Innovation as a mode of quality assurance. Wouldn't it be great to shape future youth work conferences that focus on 4 key areas, for example? Information sharing and awareness, the things that we're kind of doing today, sharing information about the things that we're doing. Taking a look at policy, lifting our head out of our practice, understanding policy and legislative developments and how that impacts on our work and how we can make our voice heard. Looking at practice, developing, innovative, learning from each other and internationally. And the creation of evidence bases. Indeed, it's the evidence base that needs to drive our innovation as a sector. For example, we could shape discussions looking at what we really mean by inclusive youth work practice. And we've heard some of that in some of the comments that were made earlier today. The creation of safe spaces and opportunities for young people. What does that really mean? What does that really look like? On boys as relational learners or agile leadership in youth work practice. Our confidence about the value of youth work approaches should drive our agenda, not the political topic of the day. Whenever there's a concern about crime or increasing homelessness or the mental health and well-being of our young people, politicians and commentators often turn to youth work. They talk of youth work's demise and the need to restore it to give young people opportunity, hope and support. To be credible, youth work must be more than a vessel blown about by the wind. It needs agile leaders with skilled practitioners and volunteers moving in one direction. We need to shape the narrative and become confident influencers for change. I've spoken about collaboration and we've already heard about the importance of partnership working. But let's be honest, we still have a long way to go if we truly want colleagues working in local authorities and the voluntary sector to trust and respect each other. I see there is a willingness to do this, but there is something about day-to-day pressures that cuts across that ambition. We've talked as a sector about a one-sector approach, but maybe we should call it youth work without boundaries. Goodness knows we've several boundaries in place in the sector at the moment. It's time to give up protecting those boundaries and old arguments on the basis that we've always done things this way, and instead to focus on how we should be working together. Collaboration based on youth work values as equals, addressing the financial power imbalance that exists and recognizing that a mutual understanding of commissioning is needed. We have a codependency. We need local authority and voluntary sector youth work to recognize and value each other. One way we might think about that is with continuing professional development, or CPD. A sector without boundaries would clearly recognize the importance of developing its workforce. How can we deliver CPD across the whole of our sector, even for those whose budgets don't stretch that far? How do we reach out to the whole sector? Another area we need to recognize is the importance of youth work volunteers. A sector without boundaries would build on youth work's ability to grow its own. That journey that many young people take from recipients of a youth work offer to volunteering and then taking a leap into youth work as a career is a real and a tangible thing. We need to value our volunteer base much more than we do. Volunteers are so important in delivering youth work services for our young people. Lots of you will recognize these things. We've been talking about them for seems like ages. If ever the sector can move from where it is to where it could be, it's now. So perhaps we need to start thinking about answering some questions that might frame what we want a youth work offer to achieve. And we've tried to outline our answer to some of these questions in our report. Questions like, how can young people really be involved and or lead the governance of youth work at a local, regional and Wales level? How can youth work maximize its impact for young people? How can youth work information reach every 11 to 25-year-old in Wales? How can we develop and use an evidence base to project and improve the importance of youth work approaches? How can we invest in research and analysis to provide insights into practice and inform policy decision-making? How do we continue engagement with other sectors, building relationships locally across Wales and internationally? What's youth work's unique selling point? What does youth work do that no one else can? How do we claim our space as a crucial key service for young people. And perhaps we really need to understand how ministers see youth work services. If ministers see youth work as useful, how do they want to deploy youth work approaches? The answers to these questions and others, no doubt, will lead us towards a design for our youth work services that will have a relevance for young people and society more generally. We will achieve impact by demonstrating the difference youth work makes to young people, but also by demonstrating how investment in youth work can impact on the public purse further down the line. A confident and vibrant universal youth work offer, valued for its own practice and unique approach, shaping the growth and development of our young people in such a way as to see less demand on our targeted services. We need to move the narrative towards recognizing that youth work is driven by a benefits model, not a risk model, that youth work achieves its best results when it focuses on benefits for young people, all young people, including those in need of support or at risk of things like exclusion, getting drawn into crime or homelessness. And we've seen during the course of the pandemic how youth work's responded to safeguarding issues that have emerged. Colleagues working in schools, health settings, housing, social work and youth justice have during the pandemic seen firsthand the power of the youth work approach. There's a lot of support that recognises that community infrastructure for young people that includes youth work services needs to be developed and supported, that the provision of a universal youth work offer should be the foundation from which our targeted services can operate to best effect. Collaboration born from a respect for the contribution that the youth work services profession in all its diversity and scope makes to young people's lives. So let's be a bit more brave about it. Developing a brand for our youth work is about getting recognition and belonging to something, but it's also about shouting out to the general public and to other public services that youth work matters. In its diversity and by its inclusive approach, it speaks to every young person in Wales. So youth work becomes all about influencing change, demonstrating impact, being accountable to the young people of Wales, as well as to the organisations that fund and support it. If that sounds like the kind of youth work movement that you want to belong to, stick around, make your voice heard, engage in the opportunities that will present themselves as we create a sustainable delivery model for youth work in Wales. As we say in our report, it really is time to deliver for the young people of Wales. I really hope that the rest of this day begins that discussion, begins that debate, and I look forward to joining you in various workshop sessions today. Diolch yn fawr iawn pawb. Thanks very much.